folks. Now for the fun part, how to cite sources in text and how to write a references section in APA style. This is oftentimes part that you may have covered in other classes. And so if you're fully comfortable with this, then you're good to go. But this will serve as a bit of a guide if you haven't quite picked up on some of these things. And also, we'll have some notes here about some changes in APA 7, which you may have learned an earlier version than this. And so there are some changes in how to do internal citations in APA 7. So in-text citations are the citations that appear in the writing. So inside your introduction section or discussion section or method section, wherever it might be, where you cite a source as you're writing to support the points that you're making or to point the reader to more information. Inside the text like this, you're going to use last names only and the year of publication. So you have some examples here on this page. You have Cassidy and Johnson, inside parentheses, comma 2002. Or you have Bylock et al., 2004. If you have more than one citation for a point, like we do here, what you're going to do is separate those citations with a semicolon. So in this case, the point is that there are negative effects of test anxiety with impeded performance on various tasks. That point is a general one, right? And so it actually has a number of citations supporting it. And you'll see that these go in alphabetical order based on the first author's last name: Cassidy, Hembry, Lang, Ramirez, Tobias. And those are separated by semicolons. So you see this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 citations being used to support this point. And you'll see that often in the papers that you read, is that you're pointing the reader to multiple sources that all support this same point. Inside parentheses like this, where the citations occur in parentheses, you're going to use the ampersand. Outside of parentheses, you're going to spell out and. So you won't use the symbol, you'll use the word and. If you have 3 or more authors, this should actually be 3 and up to any number of authors, you're going to use et al. Or and colleagues. So et al. Just means and others in Latin, et alia. So this just means Bylock and others, 2004, in parentheses, induced performance pressure, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so in this case, because there's 3 or more authors, I just include the first author's last name and et al. Now, you may have noticed on the last page that some of the citations occur inside parentheses, and some of them are outside of the parentheses, and that's going to be a big difference in your in-text citations. How to decide whether to include them in parentheses or out is going to depend on what you want to emphasize. So as you're thinking about this, anything inside parentheses will not be read out loud by a reader. Okay, so going back to the previous page, you'll see we talked about the negative effects of test anxiety are well established, blah, blah, blah. And then the parentheses don't get read out loud. So that includes IQ assessments, math evaluations, classroom performance, and standardized exams. These negative effects, blah, blah, blah. So we'll just skip over anything in the parentheses unless I really want to find out who wrote that. But I, as the reader, won't read that out loud. In contrast, if it's outside of parentheses, I will read that out loud. For instance, Bylock et al. Induced performance pressure by blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what do I want to emphasize? Do I want the author's names to be read out loud and to be the focus of attention for the participants or for the readers? Or do I want the point to be read out loud and have the authors be parenthetical for reference if they're needed. So a parenthetical citation is going to work like this. Survival processing leads to greater long-term retention than other processing tasks. Moving on, with a parenthetical citation that supports the point. Okay, this emphasizes the point made in the citation, in the sentence, and the citation supports it. A narrative citation instead emphasizes the author. So Nairn and colleagues were the first to demonstrate that survival processing leads to long-term retention gains. In this case, the point is about the authors. When do you actually include a citation? Well, any point that you make that is based on the work of other authors is going to need a citation. Okay, so you didn't come up with the idea of survival processing or test anxiety, right? And so making points about those concepts require citations of the people who defined them, or at least some source where the reader can find definitions of them. Also, any claims that are not common knowledge should also be supported by citations. So compare these points. So internet sources can contain accurate information, but sometimes contain inaccuracies or misinformation. This is common knowledge, right? This is just telling the reader about something that most people already know, that internet sources can contain both true and false things. Okay? That doesn't require a citation. Okay? However, a point like people who spend more time on the internet believe in more misinformation than people who spend less time on the internet. That's not common knowledge, and in fact, it may or may not even be true. Okay, so a point like that is not just basic common knowledge that everybody knows. It's going to require some citation to it. You can't just make claims like that without citation. In general, in APA style, we discourage direct quotations. There's two reasons for that. One is that the specific wording of entire sentences is not usually important. Okay, so usually you could make a point in a different way without relying on the exact wording from an entire sentence or paragraph from another source. Okay? I just did it. I just made the same point twice in different ways. Okay? So make your own points rather than copying the points of others. And in general, oftentimes students will try to avoid quotations by taking a quotation, copying it into their document, and then just changing a couple of words around. Don't do that either, right? Because oftentimes, you'll rely on a thesaurus to change a word, and it'll actually change the meaning of the sentence. What you really want to do is read something, understand it, okay, and walk away. And then come back and write your own paper in your own words based on your understanding. Then include a citation for where you got those ideas. So I'm going to read about a study about test anxiety, understand that study, put it away, okay, and then describe that study and how it's relevant to this broader area of research, okay, and describe that in my own words and cite the source of that information. Okay, that's what you want to be doing instead of taking blocks of text and mangling it around. One note on quotations: terms of art like social distancing or cognitive dissonance don't need quotations. Okay. Even though it's two words that also appear in some other text, those words show up in all sorts of sources. So they're not just from one source, and that quotation, that specific wording, doesn't come just from one person. It's a term of art. If you do end up including a quotation for some reason, maybe the specific definition of something needs to be spelled out, make sure that you include a page number for that quotation, because what you're saying is that this quotation came from a specific page and a specific source that you should be able to find. So that page number must be included on any quotations. Okay, here is a table that your APA style manual includes for how to do internal citations for one author, two authors, three or more, abbreviations or groups. And you can see how that works both in parentheses or narratively spelled out in the text. So this is a good resource for you. Just figure out how many authors you have and whether you're doing it parenthetically or narratively, and this should be a good source. Okay, so that's how you do in-text citations. Anything that you cite in text needs to show up in the references section. Okay, and here I have general format for how you cite journal articles in the references section. And for the most part in psychology papers, you're going to be using peer-reviewed journal articles like this one. So here I have a kind of template version and then an example of an article that I was second author on. So you're going to include the last name, first and middle initials. So you don't spell out the first names here, it's just the initials. Notice that there are spaces in between the initials. And you're going to include as many authors as are included on the paper. Before the last author, use an ampersand. Then the year shows up in parentheses. The article title shows up. Then the journal title and the volume number, both italicized. Then the page numbers. Then this thing called the DOI. So this is our general format that you can use these as a template to follow. There are other types of references that might show up, like books or book chapters or websites or media or unpublished manuscripts. APA has rules for all of these. And so if you're doing a study and you're including a song as materials and you want to cite that song, APA has rules for how to cite songs. So just go ahead and check your APA manual or another reliable source, maybe Purdue OWL or APA's website. Just Google how to cite a song in APA style and you will find instructions on it. Okay, so you can cite any of these sources in APA style. They'll just be less common than the journal articles. You're going to put all of your references on a references page. It is separated from the rest of the text with a page break. At the top of the page, it says references. So it shouldn't say works cited or bibliography. It says references, bolded and centered. You'll put your articles in order, in alphabetical order, by the last name of the first author. Okay, so in this case, it's the same first author, but we're going to follow the next author. That's also the same. Okay, here's the third. Okay. So you're going to go in order by the last author's, the first author's last name. You're going to order these in your references page, and you're going to include what's known as a hanging indent, where the second line is indented. One thing to be careful here, you don't want to just go to this word and hit the tab button. You want to set it up to actually include a hanging indent, and you can do that in a couple ways, but the easiest way to figure out how to do it if you don't know already is to just Google how to do a hanging indent. One component of the references section that students often miss is this thing called the DOI, or the Digital Object Identifier. This goes at the end, and it's essentially looks like a URL. Sometimes can even be spelled out as a URL, doi.org/, and then all these numbers is actually a website or a link, a URL. That goes at the end here. And the purpose of this is so that anybody can search for this or plug this into their web browser and actually get to the article itself. And that means, if you spelled the last name wrong or missed some other component of the reference, the DOI will still get me to that reference. And that's actually makes it much more useful than the rest of the information. Where do you get this information? Where do I get the DOI? On recently published articles, it'll actually be on the PDF. It'll have the DOI usually at the top, sometimes at the bottom of the first page. You can just grab it from there. If you found it in the library listing should include the DOI. There's a DOI tool that I linked to for my class in D2L, but you can also Google DOI tool from Crossref, CROSSREF. Crossref is a DOI tool where you plug in your citation, it'll give you the DOI. The other option is to just Google the article. So Google the name of this article and find it on the publisher's website. So this publisher, the publisher of the journal Memory, will actually have the DOI on their website. So any of these sources can get you the DOI if you can't find it. As you're going through citing sources internally or externally, keep in mind you can rely on the templates that are provided or that you can find online. The APA style manual, especially if you're looking for some sort of citation that's less common, the APA style manual has advice on how to do electronic resources and dissertations and that sort of thing. And then finally, Purdue OWL is a good online website that has formatting recommendations for APA style.